Hi, everyone. Let's see. There it is. I'm using StreamYard for the first time. So I wanted to make sure that it was up and it was working, and it is. I am going to give a minute or so to see if we can get some more friends on, and then we'll get started. And hi to everyone who may not be joining us live. Thank you for tuning in later. I hope that this live is beneficial to you as we get ready for the Thanksgiving season. Let's see. StreamYard is really cool, y'all. Here, let me see. I'm going to share my screen. And where is it? All right. So you all should be able to see my screen and me. Wonderful. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi again. I'm so excited to be with you all this evening. And just to give you guys a little background, so Thanksgiving's coming up, and let's be honest, the world is in shambles. And I just wanted to create space so that we don't lose track of some of the most important work that still needs to be done, no matter the turnout of the election. And some of that work is continuing to decolonize our classrooms. So as you can see on the screen, I've created the Educator's Guide to Decolonizing Thanksgiving. And this is going to be our first session, like really grounding us. And then each Thursday this month, including Thanksgiving Thursday, so make a little time Thanksgiving evening. Each Thursday this month, I will be going live at 7 p.m. on Thursdays. I'm going to have some special guests, some wonderful Indigenous Native women that I've had the opportunity to share space with through academic study. And we are going to bring you all resources, tools, and just some reflections about how to tell the true story of Thanksgiving in your classroom. So we're going to go ahead and get started for today because I don't want to take a lot of your time. And we're going to get started with essentially just previewing this document. And then I'm going to put a link in the chat box where you all can access this resource completely free on Equity's website when we're done. So in preparing for today and thinking about the grounding work that I wanted to do with everyone, I essentially grouped the work we need to do into two easy buckets, right? Do's and don'ts. And before we get started with those do's and don'ts, I just wanted to share with you all a quote and just a saying, a mantra, if you will, a call to action that I've been sharing with a lot of people in recent weeks and days about the work that educators have to continue to do. So this note is also on the guide for you to reference in the future. But as educators, I want us to really think about how we have to confront our own complicitness in racism and employ all facets of anti-racism in our practice. And that doesn't just stop at talking about the Black experience in America. It expands to talking about the Latinx experience, the Asian experience, the Native and Indigenous people's experience in this country. And this month, we're going to speak truth to power through really zooming in on our Native Indigenous sisters and brothers and people and their experience in America. So first bucket, do's. One thing that I think is incredibly important as we move into this season is we decolonize our language. And let me take a step back. When I say decolonize, I mean we decenter whiteness in the way that we speak about Thanksgiving and how we even interface and interact with the pronunciations, with the spellings of indigenous peoples, tribes, groups, and their names. So one resource, and I know this is really simple, y'all, but I'm big on, calling people to action, but also providing resources. One resource that has been incredibly helpful to me, and I want to switch my tabs really quickly. And this tool has been incredibly helpful to me. It is Google's pronunciation guide. And many people know that the story of Thanksgiving centers on the story of the Wampanoag tribe. The Wampanoag tribe. And it's really important because as a person of color who finds it greatly disrespectful to mispronounce my own name or to misspell my own name, it was important for me and for me as an educator to speak power and truth to Indigenous and Native people too. I can't expect someone else to decenter whiteness and spell Latrice right, to pronounce Latrice right, if I can't do the same thing for them. So this is a tool, just wanted to show it to you guys, really cool. It gives you the phonetic pronunciation, but it also, you can play it. Wampanoag. You can also practice by turning your microphone on and you can speak it. It'll give you feedback. But what's really helpful for a lot of people, including kids, is this pronunciation, actual mouth that's moving. So that is a tool that you can employ in lots of places in your classroom, but specifically around words and names that some people may find difficult to say. So let's switch back to our guide. And boom, okay, so we're back. Another do is definitely focus on things that kids can connect with, things that people are able to connect with across culture. So one thing I highly suggest is a focus on food, and not to minimalize culture at all or an experience, but it's a way, food is a part of every culture, right? Like as a Southern Black girl, food is a huge part of my life. And Thanksgiving for me has never been so much around this idea of pilgrims coming to not the United States, clearly the land of Indigenous people that they thought they had found or discovered. And it has never been about that. It's been about family. And what do? We get together as a family, we eat. So this focus on food is a way for all children, no matter their heritage, their culture, their background, to draw parallels to the experience of Thanksgiving. And they're able to examine the traditional foods that likely were eaten at the first, whenever or whatever the first Thanksgiving truly was. And we'll get to that a little later. But they can draw connections because in cultures across the world, people make connections through food. And quickly, two more do's. Explain and explore mixed feelings. There is no way to have this conversation without talking about the intricacies, the complexities of this idea of the first Thanksgiving, right? Like we cannot talk about this supposed happy celebration amongst Indigenous and colonizers without talking about the years and years of war and bloodshed that ensued shortly after. So explore those mixed feelings and allow your students to sit with, right? Like, Thanksgiving is usually a holiday where many children, families, people experience a lot of happiness because they get to be in community. But knowing that this is a holiday and what this holiday is built on can cause some cognitive dissonance for students and allow them to sit in it and explore it. And I invite you as an educator to sit in it and explore it with them. And finally, through my learnings and research, I've learned that a huge component of many Indigenous people's cultures and practice is emphasizing gratitude. It's spiritual in Indigenous culture, and I think that in my personal belief, gratitude is a spiritual act. And shifting away from this historical, empty, just tradition of feasting with your family, but deeply exploring what does it mean to be, to show gratitude? What does it mean to be gracious? What does it mean to be thankful? And how you can actualize like being thankful in your classroom, your communities, and beyond. So quickly moving to don'ts, because I promise I don't want these to last longer than 15, 20 minutes. Don'ts seem really simple that I've put together, but these are moves that I have witnessed. These are moves that maybe I have done in a way, or I have read about and shifted my beliefs on and my practice on as an educator, and I just want to share them with you. And by no means are these do's and don'ts a comprehensive list. It's just a sharing and offering of sorts. So the first seems really simple, but I'll give you guys a little backstory. The first one is don't perpetuate stereotypes. So a few years ago, when I was working in a school here in Metro Atlanta, there was a teacher who was very adamant about assigning children roles of Indians, which for me, back to Decolonize Our Language, was troubling, or pilgrims. And she wanted them to reenact this grand meal and what she wanted them to wear, how she wanted them to act. It was so stereotypical to the point that it was disgusting and hurtful to see. And I just want to remind everyone, like, through our unlearning, learning, relearning about Thanksgiving and Indigenous people and culture, more broadly, Indigenous people's culture, Black people's culture, Asian people's culture, they're not cosplay. It's not an opportunity for us to play dress up and impersonate what we think these people would act like or look like or sound like or talk like. It is not an opportunity for that. It's not an opportunity to tokenize sacred objects and artifacts and heirlooms through, just craft making for the purpose of fun, right? So I just want us to dig into not perpetuating stereotypes deeper than just in what we say and what we talk about, but also what we do. Secondly, don't teach inaccurate information. So many people think like, oh, we know the story of Thanksgiving. But just like we know that textbooks are whitewashed and they tell the history of the colonizer, when it comes to slavery, when it comes to just imperialism and colonization around the world, the same thing happens and has happened and continues to happen when it comes to this story of Thanksgiving, right? So there, in my research, I found at least 3 different accounts of the first Thanksgiving. You can Do quick Google searches and you'll see that there are places in Massachusetts, in Virginia, that claim to be the locations and the first Thanksgiving. But these stories are complex. They are violent. And they are not just this gather around, let's have a meal and celebrate the merging of our people and cultures peacefully. It's not this simple story. So if we're going to teach the story of Thanksgiving, especially when you get into upper elementary, middle, and high school, present your students with, of course, appropriate for their age, with these stories and these conflicting histories, and allow them, again, to go back to the Dukes, allow them to explain and explore the mixed feelings and the mixed histories that exist. And finally, the third don't, really be cautious of presenting any group of people across any identity line, any identity marker as a monolith. One thing that I experience is this monolith of Black women. And I know how deeply troubling and how invisible I feel when people hold me to whatever stereotype of Black women they may have. And because I know that, I need to use that as a place of reference when teaching about Indigenous people. The histories, even just from my research, put the first Thanksgiving as a story that involved the Wampanoag tribe, as well as the Samoyed and the Pequot tribe. And it's very important that we understand that there are different histories and different stories of this first supposedly iconic and beautiful event. But all of these stories are associated with the either direct or indirect pillaging, murdering, and just violence brought amongst these group of people. Each of these groups of people, and I want us to understand that those are just three of many, many, many different Indigenous and Native groups in this country. And we must move away from saying Native Americans and Pilgrims. No, if we're going to talk about it, say the names of the groups of people, because these groups of people are people and they deserve to have their names spoken and their history shared accurately. So I'm going to wrap this up because we've got 3 minutes, and I promise you, I'm not going to go over 20 minutes. Again, this document, I'm going to drop it in the comments in a second. I included 4 resources. The first is the Teaching Tolerance Thanksgiving 2019 guide. I'll update it once the 2020 guide is available. But the Teaching Tolerance, and I always cringe because I hate the name. I don't believe in tolerance. Tolerance is such a low grab for me when it comes to understanding and interacting and deeply appreciating people different from you. Additionally, the Native Knowledge 360 project is a wonderful resource. So is News ELA. This is just a search. So what I did was I went to the website, I typed in Thanksgiving, and there's tons of articles that come up that if you're familiar with the resource, as an educator, you can adjust for different lexile levels. And these resources are actual news articles that are pulled and adjusted to meet varying levels of students. And this resource is usually recommended for kids who are around 3rd grade and up. And finally, the National Congress of American Indians. This resource is really important to me because it has allowed me as an educator, and it will allow you to zoom into the Indigenous and Native peoples of your locale and where you live and learn more about the land, the borrows, I don't even think borrow is appropriate, the stolen land that we all exist and live on today. And that is a connection to like the do of emphasizing gratitude, because where I sit right now, this land didn't belong to the colonizers who came along and took it from the indigenous people that were here first. And it also allows students to make a more direct connection to their place, time, and just where they are in the world. It's not this far off existence and happening that is rooted in the Plymouth colony or with the Pilgrims or in this just place that's just so disconnected from them. It's a way to say, well, yes, there were indigenous people in what is now Massachusetts, and there were also indigenous people wherever you are. So 7:20 on the dot, I made it. I hope this has proved useful. I'm going to put the link. It's on equityconsulting.com under the resources tab, but I promise, I'm going to put it in the chat box. And thank you all again. And thank you for bearing with me as I figure out how to use StreamYard. This is like really cool. All right. So everyone have a safe night, have a restful night, have a blessed night, and I will see you all next Thursday. Bye, everyone.